Today we are continuing our look inside the 1913 Nunn Block building, and we'll hear more about the life of G.C. Nunn.
Well, now we're going upstairs to the third floor apartments. There were apartments on the east side of the building and on the west side. This was the hallway that separated the apartments. And there you see the floors had been covered with linoleum. I can still remember as a young boy when linoleum was put down on the new floors at the farmhouse. Here has been water damage to the plaster. There's a light switch. That's something new to me, a light switch like that. But it was used back in the early times. Opening and closing the windows, looking out across the town of Detroit Lakes. There was a weight system in those windows that made it easier to open and close them. You see the weight there hanging on the side on that rope. That was inside the window frame. Now we're down the basement where G.C. Nunn had his harness shop. This was the door to his harness shop. The latch on the door. This was the harness shop. This part of the building here was where he was making harnesses. And he moved his shop down here after the automobiles came along and there wasn't as much harness business anymore. And this part here now is where the hardware store was, the other side of the wall.
And that's when we knew him the best, is when he had his shop in the basement. And you didn't have to have harness to come and see Grandpa. He was the town counselor. He just had everybody coming down there to lay their troubles at his feet and get some inspiration from him. He would come home at noon, and the thing I guess I remember most is all of us grandkids that were at the lake would walk up the road when the noon whistle went, and he'd stop and give us, we'd ride on his fenders and his lights, and I don't know how he could ever see where he was going, except that he'd had driven it so many times. He probably knew it by heart.
And we stood on the running boards, and
yes,
he would
the
take
little
us
kids
home.
had to stand on the running boards.
Well, G.C. Nunn was one of my favorite uncles when I was real young. He had the harness shop down in the basement under the old Coast to Coast store, the old sporting goods store. And when it was raining, nothing else to do, we could go down in the shop and just watch him work. So that was very interesting. And they owned property out on Big Detroit Lake, a beautiful point. So once in a while we'd get a chance to go out there, and it was just a fun place.
We have lots of memories from the lake because we spent every summer of our lives up there for 3 months with these cousins. The lake was, Grandpa purchased this property in 1904. Correct me, Beth, if I'm... Purchased this property in 1904, and he built the first cottage in 1908, and that's still standing there. And Beth and her family, her mother and her family lived in that cottage. And then he built the second house. As the children went away to college and got married, he needed more room, so he built a second cottage, which is where my mother stayed. So the two sisters shared this property, and now the generation, now the descendants of the two sisters of Grandpa's two daughters share that property. And both cottages are still there. They've been improved a little, but they're still there, and we come back every summer.
When she says they've improved, we went from candles and lanterns to electricity, and from the pump to running water. That's the way we've improved.
Outdoor bathrooms too.
And we've changed the canvas drop curtains to glass curtains, so the snow doesn't come in.
Yes, because we slept on the sleeping porches.
Yep.
Is all it was in the summer. But we did enclose those porches and remodel a little. Well, I was I was the youngest of Grandpa's grandchildren, and or that was at the lake anyway, every summer with him. And he came to my rescue many times when my older cousins would entice me to crawl up a tree or do something that was beyond my ability. But when I turned, I don't know, 16 maybe, he gave me his old Oldsmobile. He no longer was driving, so I would drive him to town every day. He was totally retired by then, didn't go down, didn't have his shop in the basement, but I would drive him to town every day. It was the most important thing that I ever did, was my beloved grandfather would sit next to me in his car, and he was always in a suit and a vest, and he would, do you remember how he would greet everybody as we drove through town? Everybody knew him. Kindest, dearest gentleman, and he would greet them and I would drive. And it was the most important mission of my life. And I had that car for many years. And then when I went to college, I guess Mother had me sell it to Warren for $25. I wanted that car back, but Warren had lost track of it too.
G.C. was in the harness making business for nearly 70 years in Detroit Lakes. He was married to Mary J. Whitmore, who passed away in 1939. In 1955, G.C. passed away at the age of 90.
Join us next week for our final installment of our stories on the Nunn family.